Rain whispers against the old brick walls of the dormitory, each droplet catching the dull yellow glow of a flickering streetlight outside. The hallway stretches long and empty, lined with doors that look identical, but somehow none of them feel the same. Inside each room, people are laughing, scrolling on their phones, whispering secrets to new friends. But in the silence between those moments, in the spaces after midnight, something else moves. It's the kind of silence that doesn't just mean quiet. It means presence. The narrator's voice cuts softly through the ambient hum. College dorms are supposed to be places of growth, a beginning, a space where you make memories, friends, mistakes. But some dorms remember too much. The sound design carries distant footsteps, the faint creak of a floorboard, a door closing just a bit too slowly. It feels less like narration and more like a warning whispered across time. We drift through a cinematic montage, empty hallways under emergency lights, textbooks open on abandoned desks, a lonely sock on a laundry room floor, a message board with faded sticky notes saying, "Good luck this semester." The music is melancholic. Minor piano chords layered over a low ambient drone that almost sounds like breathing. The camera slowly pans toward an old dorm door with peeling paint and a brass number barely hanging on its nail. 312. The hallway light flickers as if reacting to the narrator's words. Every college has its stories. The roommate who vanished before midterms. The basement that no one's supposed to enter. The quiet crying from a vent at night when no one else is awake. These aren't urban legends. They're memories etched into these walls. The kind of memories that don't fade when the semester ends. The tone is calm but heavy, deliberate in pacing, giving the listener's imagination space to bloom with dread. The atmosphere deepens, the faint echo of laughter, as if someone's still in the common room long after lights out. The sound fades slowly, replaced by the distant chime of a campus clock striking midnight. The narrator continues, "You'll hear 10 stories tonight. True accounts of students who shared their lives with something else in the place they called home. Each story begins the same way, a student moving in full of hope, and ends with a question that never found an answer." The camera glides through the corridors, past rooms filled with silent objects. A half-packed suitcase, a mirror covered by a sheet, a photograph of smiling faces pinned above a bed. A shadow passes briefly across the frame, but there's no source for it. The lighting shifts subtly from warm to cold, the glow of nostalgia fading into unease. Emotionally, this moment lingers between curiosity and dread. The narrator's voice lowers, nearly whispering. The walls of these dorms have heard everything. Confessions whispered at 3 a.m. Cries muffled by pillows. Laughter that turned to silence. And some nights, when the campus sleeps, the walls whisper back. There's a moment of stillness, just the soft sound of the rain again, tapping gently like fingertips on glass. The perspective tightens, focusing on one window glowing faintly in the distance. A figure stands behind it, unmoving, barely visible, watching. The shot lingers long enough for the audience to question if they truly saw someone there or if it was just the shifting light. As the score swells softly, the narrator concludes the opening reflection with a tone that's both ominous and hypnotic. So tonight, if you're still awake, if the wind makes your dorm window rattle, don't be so quick to blame the storm. Sometimes it's not the wind that wants in. Sometimes it's what the dorm itself refuses to let go. The camera begins to move down the hall again, the light bulbs dimming one by one, plunging the corridor into darkness. The final bulb flickers violently, buzzing with electrical hum, until it finally dies. The screen fades to black, and all that's left is the faint echo of breathing and a single metallic creak, the sound of a doorknob turning. A brief silence. Then, a door opens. The narrator exhales softly, almost a whisper. Our first story begins in room 312, where a girl moved in, but never really checked out. The music fades to a deep, low tone that carries into the next scene, signaling the start of the first horror story. The transition feels seamless, soft but chilling, pulling the listener into the next moment with quiet dread and irresistible curiosity. The rain had stopped by the time Lena arrived at the dorm, the air thick with that faint metallic smell of wet pavement. She dragged her suitcase down the hall, wheels rattling over uneven tiles, the fluorescent lights above flickering in a steady rhythm that felt almost like breathing. Room 312 waited at the end. Just another door, same beige paint, same gold-plated number. But when she slid her keycard and pushed it open, the air inside felt heavier, cold, even though the heater was humming softly. The walls were painted the same dull cream as the rest of the building. Yet there was a strange faint stain above the headboard, as if something once hung there and had been taken down long ago. Her new roommate, Kara, was sitting cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through her phone with a blank expression. She barely looked up. "You're Lena, right? Don't mind the noise at night," she said flatly. "The pipes or something. They never fix it." Her tone was casual, but the way her eyes darted briefly toward the far corner of the room before looking back down made Lena's stomach twist. That first night, Lena lay awake listening. The dorm had the usual sounds. Doors closing, distant laughter, footsteps in the hall. But under all of that, something else moved. A soft, deliberate pacing. The creak of floorboards just beyond her bed. When she sat up, heart racing, the room was empty. Kara was fast asleep, turned toward the wall. Days passed, and the noises grew bolder. Some nights, Lena heard whispering from the vent, faint and rhythmic, like someone reciting words over and over. Other nights, she caught a scent of old perfume, floral, powdery, the kind that lingered in thrift store coats. When she mentioned it, Kara shrugged. "That's just the room," she muttered. "You'll get used to her." Her. The word stuck with Lena. She wanted to ask who her was, but the look in Kara's eyes stopped her. There was something haunted there. Fatigue, maybe, or fear that had turned into routine. By week 2, Lena started noticing things moving. A book on her desk slightly off from where she left it. The blinds tilted differently. Her hairbrush on the floor, though she swore she hadn't touched it. Every time she questioned it, she felt foolish. Maybe she was overtired. Maybe it really was the pipes, the wind, the settling of an old building. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp taps from inside the closet. Always after midnight. Always when Kara wasn't in the room. The pacing quickened. Thuds across the floor that seemed to circle her bed, growing closer until the air itself seemed to pulse with movement. One night, unable to take it anymore, Lena whispered into the dark, "What do you want?" The answer came not in words, but in scent. That same perfume, sudden and suffocating, as if someone were standing inches from her face. The next morning, Kara was gone. Her bed perfectly made, her drawers empty. No note, no sound. Lena tried asking around. RAs? Neighbors? Campus staff? But everyone said the same thing. No one by that name is registered in this dorm. Her heart sank when she checked the student directory herself. No Kara. No last name. Nothing. Sleep deprivation hit her hard after that. She began hearing 2 sets of footsteps, hers and someone else's, whenever she walked down the hallway. Her phone would buzz with unknown numbers that never left a message. She tried recording the sounds one night, leaving her phone by the closet door. In the morning, when she played the file back, there was a faint whisper, distorted by static. "Don't let her leave again." That day, she packed her bags. She couldn't stay another night in that room. As she zipped her suitcase, the light above her flickered violently. The scent of perfume filled the air, stronger this time, almost burning her throat. The closet door creaked open on its own. For the briefest moment, she saw something inside. A reflection in the dark, pale eyes watching her from between the hanging clothes. She stumbled backward, heart pounding, and the door slammed shut. She ran out into the hall, not looking back, not even stopping when the RA yelled after her. She slept that night in the lounge downstairs, curled on the couch beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. The world felt unreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's dream. When morning came, she went back up to grab the rest of her things. But when she reached room 312, the number was gone. The door stood open, the room stripped bare. No beds, no posters, no furniture. Just 4 walls and a floor coated in dust. She thought maybe she had the wrong floor, but the keycard still worked. It beeped green, even though there was nothing left inside. She never told anyone the truth. She transferred dorms the next week, moved to a newer building on the other side of campus. Still, every now and then, she'd wake up to that faint smell of perfume or catch the sound of footsteps pacing just outside her door. She told herself it was her imagination, the trauma of stress, the tricks of a restless mind. But one night, scrolling through an old campus forum, she found a post from years before. It was dated 2014. The title read, "Don't take room 312. The post described a girl who died in that very dorm after locking herself in the closet for 3 days. No one knew why. Her name was Kara. The entry ended with a single line that made Lena's blood run cold. If you ever hear her pacing, don't speak to her. She only wants someone to stay. That night, as Lena turned off the light and tried to sleep, she heard the creak of a floorboard, slow, deliberate, right beside her bed. Then, the faintest whisper near her ear. Don't let her leave again. The room fell silent. The air pressed heavy against her chest. And somewhere deep in her mind, beneath the terror, a quiet realization formed. She hadn't moved out of room 312 at all. The sound fades to black, the final echo of a door creaking closed blending into the narrator's voice, calm but trembling with weight. Some rooms are never really empty, even when you move out. The dorm's 3rd floor had that faint smell of old paint and microwave popcorn that seemed to cling to every college building after midterms. Ava pushed open the door to her new room, balancing 2 boxes and a bag of takeout, trying to ignore the exhaustion settling into her bones. The space was small but livable. A bunk bed against the far wall, 2 desks, and a single window that overlooked the campus courtyard. The bed nearest the door was already neatly made, covered in a light blue comforter. On the desk beside it sat a coffee mug, a stack of notebooks, and a small framed photo of someone's family. Her new roommate, Tara, wasn't there when she arrived. That night, Ava unpacked quietly, humming to herself, listening to the faint sounds of laughter and music filtering through the walls. Around 11, the door opened softly. Tara walked in, a quiet girl, petite, with dark hair tucked behind her ears. She smiled faintly but didn't say much. Just a polite hey, then climbed into bed, back turned. Ava noticed she didn't even plug in her phone. The next morning, when Ava woke up, the other bed was perfectly made again. The photo, the mug, the notebooks, all still there, but Tara was gone. She assumed she'd gone to class early. That night, she came back from a late lecture to find Tara's laptop open on the desk, a document blinking on the screen, half-written sentences that didn't make sense. She's still here. She's still... And then nothing. Ava closed it quickly, unsettled but unsure why. Days passed like that. Nights where Tara came in late, quiet as a shadow, and mornings when she was gone before sunrise. Sometimes Ava thought she heard whispering in the middle of the night, soft murmurs from the other side of the room. But whenever she stirred, the sound would stop. One night, Ava woke suddenly around 2 a.m. The room was dark except for the blinking light from her laptop charger. She sat up, feeling that strange, charged silence, the kind that seems to wait for you to move. That's when she noticed it, 2 shadows on the far wall. One was hers, faint from the streetlight slipping through the blinds. The other was taller, closer to the closet. It shifted slightly, as if turning to face her. Her throat went dry. When she turned on her lamp, there was nothing there. Tara's bed was neatly made, untouched. The next day, Ava asked the RA if her roommate had checked out early. The RA frowned. "You don't have a roommate," she said. Ava laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke, but the woman's face stayed serious. "You're assigned to a single. Room 218. It's been that way since August." Ava felt cold all over. "No, there's someone else in there. Her stuff's still there." But when she returned to the room, everything on Tara's side was gone. No comforter, no mug, no notebooks. The bed looked as if it had never been touched. She stood frozen in the doorway, heartbeat pounding in her ears, her breath coming short. That night, She decided to stay at a friend's place across campus. Just for one night, she told herself. But something pulled her back. Curiosity, guilt, maybe both. Around midnight, she returned to the dorm. The hallway was quiet, most lights dimmed. When she reached her door, it was already ajar. Inside, the air was freezing. Her desk light flickered softly, casting long, warped shadows. On Tara's bed lay the photo frame, the same one Ava had seen before, face down. She turned it over and her stomach dropped. The picture showed two girls. One of them was unmistakably Tara. The other was Ava. Her hands trembled as she stared at it. It didn't make sense. She'd never met this girl before moving here. The photo looked old. Slightly yellowed around the edges, the colors faded. She wanted to throw it away, but something in her gut told her not to touch it. The next morning, she woke up feeling disoriented. Her clothes still on from the night before. She couldn't remember falling asleep. The sunlight streaming through the window made the room look normal again. Too normal. She glanced toward the other bed and froze. Tara was there, sitting upright, staring at the wall. Her voice was quiet, almost childlike. "You left me." Ava's mouth went dry. "Tara?" The girl turned her head slowly, her eyes unfocused, her expression empty. "You said you wouldn't leave this time." Before Ava could move, Tara smiled faintly and dissolved into air, like a reflection breaking apart in water. The sunlight flickered, and when Ava blinked, the bed was empty again. Only the faint indent of a body remained on the sheets. Panicking, she grabbed her phone and snapped a picture. Desperate for proof she wasn't losing her mind. But when she checked the photo, there were two figures standing in the frame, one in her bed, one in the other. Both had her face. That night, Ava packed what she could and requested an emergency dorm transfer. The housing office didn't argue. They simply looked at the room number and nodded grimly, as if they'd heard it all before. She moved into a different building across campus. A newer dorm with white walls and bright lights. Everything seemed fine for a few days. But every morning, when she woke up, her bed would be made perfectly, tight and smooth, as if someone else had done it. She stopped locking the door, afraid that if she did, she'd hear that quiet knock again. The one that used to come from the other side of the closet. One night, unable to sleep, she opened her camera roll. The photo of the two girls was still there. But now only one face remained. Hers. The other bed creaked softly in the dark, as if someone had just climbed into it. Ava closed her eyes, whispering to herself over and over that she was alone, that she was safe, that it was over. But from the other side of the room, a soft voice echoed her words back to her. Same tone, same pitch, but not quite human. "I'm alone. I'm safe. It's over." And then the whisper paused, just long enough for Ava to realize it wasn't repeating anymore. It was answering. The light flickered once. The air shifted, and the sound of breathing filled the room. Two people perfectly in sync. The narrator's voice fades in slowly, low and reflective. Some rooms don't take new tenants. They just keep the ones who never left. A faint click echoes. The sound of a door closing, the latch catching softly, and the scene fades to darkness. The library was supposed to close at midnight, but in college, rules like that were flexible. Ava's friend group, 4 of them, liked to meet in what they jokingly called the crypt, a small study room tucked behind the basement stacks of the humanities building. The room wasn't listed anywhere on the campus map, but it was always open, always empty, and always cold. The first time they found it, they thought it was a storage closet until they flipped the switch and the fluorescent lights hummed to life, casting everything in sterile white. No windows, just concrete walls painted over so many times they looked like they were sweating. There was a long wooden table in the center, carved with initials, dates, and a few strange symbols none of them recognized. The air always smelled faintly of dust and copier toner, even though there wasn't a printer within 50 feet. They'd spread their laptops out, snack wrappers piling in the corner, music playing softly from someone's phone. It became a sanctuary, quiet, private, removed from the chaos upstairs. They met there almost every night during finals week. By the third night, things started to feel off. Jules, the quietest in the group, noticed first. "Did anyone else notice the hum?" he asked, glancing up at the flickering light above. It wasn't just a buzz, it was rhythmic, almost patterned, like breathing or a slow heartbeat. The others brushed it off. The building was ancient, full of bad wiring. Still, the sound stuck in their ears, like something alive hidden behind the walls. Around 3 a.m., Mara left to get coffee. She was gone maybe 10 minutes, but when she came back, her face was pale. "The hallway's gone," she whispered. They all laughed at first, thinking she meant she got lost. But when they stepped outside, the hallway lights were dark, the exit signs dead. The corridor stretched longer than before, the walls wet-looking, the floor slightly uneven, as if it sloped downward. Ethan, ever the skeptic, led the way, waving his phone flashlight around. "It's just the breaker," he muttered. "Probably shut off part of the floor." But when they turned back, the door to the crypt was gone. Just smooth wall. No seam, no handle. Their footsteps echoed strangely, the sound warping, bouncing off walls that didn't feel solid anymore. The hum followed them, steady and low, vibrating under their skin. Jules swore he could hear words in it, whispers buried in the tone, but no one else could make them out. The air thickened with that old, wet concrete smell, metallic and heavy. When they finally found another door, it was unlocked. They stumbled inside, desperate for light, only to realize it was the crypt again. Same table, same wrappers, same hum. Mara started to cry quietly, whispering that she wanted to go back upstairs, that she just wanted to see the sky. Ethan tried to open the door again, but this time it wouldn't budge. His flashlight began to flicker, and when he smacked it against his palm, the beam briefly illuminated something on the far wall. Letters scratched deep into the paint. "Don't study alone." Jules' voice cracked. "What if we're not supposed to be here?" The light flickered again, longer this time, and the carved initials on the table looked fresh. Still gouged, the edges splintered. One set of initials stood out, newer than the rest. M.R. 2023. Mara froze. That's mine." The hum grew louder, shaking dust from the ceiling. One of the bulbs overhead popped, showering sparks. In the dim light, they saw something move, a shape shifting beneath the surface of the wall, pressing outward, as if something behind it wanted to get through. The paint stretched, cracking in thin lines that looked like veins. Ethan lunged for the handle again, shouting that it had to be a prank, some trick of the wiring, but the door wouldn't move. Then, faintly from the other side, came a knock. 3 slow taps. Jules whispered, "Someone's out there." He pressed his ear to the door. The knocking repeated 3 times again, but this time from inside the room, just behind him. He spun around, breath caught in his throat. The others stared in frozen silence. The sound was coming from under the table. Ethan lifted the edge, trembling. There was nothing underneath but the floor. The knocking stopped. Then, from above, the light flickered violently, casting everything in rapid flashes of brightness and shadow. Each time the light came back on, the room seemed slightly different, the walls closer, the air thicker. Mara screamed suddenly, backing away from the wall. Her voice cracked into sobs as she pointed. "Look, look." The paint had begun to peel, the surface blistering as if under heat. Words began to appear, scrawled in faint, ghostly script. "You stayed too long." Jules' voice was trembling. "We need to leave." They pounded on the door until their hands were raw. Ethan kicked it until the wood cracked, and finally it gave way. The hallway outside was bright again, normal. The hum stopped. Everything was still. They ran upstairs without looking back, bursting through the lobby doors and into the night air. The campus was silent, empty. Their watches all read 6:17 a.m., though they'd only been down there a little past 3. When they tried to tell campus security, the officers shrugged. The basement had been sealed for years, they said. There were no study rooms there, only storage. That night, Jules couldn't sleep. The hum was still in his ears, faint but constant. He looked at his phone, it was recording. The timer showed 6 hours of audio. He didn't remember hitting record. When he played it back, it was just static. Until the last few seconds. A whisper. His own voice. Don't study alone. The next day, he didn't show up to class. No one saw him again after that. Months later, the janitor cleaning the humanities building found a door deep in the basement behind some shelving. The sign beside it read Study Room B12, but when they tried the handle, it was welded shut. On the wall beside it, carved faintly into the paint, were 4 sets of initials. One of them was M. R. 2023. The narrator's voice fades in, slow and deliberate. Not every space on campus was meant for us. Some rooms don't let go of the people who find them. The fluorescent hum grows louder for a moment, then cuts to silence, leaving only the soft rustle of paper and the click of a light switch turning off. The performing arts dorm was always alive with sound. Distant piano notes drifting down hallways, laughter echoing from rehearsal rooms, the rhythmic thump of someone practicing choreography in the room above. For most students, the building was comforting, alive. For Nadia, it was home. She was a theater major, driven, meticulous, the kind of person who lived for the stage lights. When she got the top floor room in the old wing of the dorm, she considered it luck. The room was larger than most, with tall windows that framed the campus courtyard like a stage backdrop. The only odd thing was the smell. A faint scent of dust and something else, something like velvet left in the dark too long. Her roommate had moved out mid-semester, leaving the place mostly hers. She didn't mind the quiet. She rehearsed monologues in front of the mirror every night, her voice bouncing off the walls, her movements precise. But soon, she started to notice something strange. When she rehearsed lines from her upcoming play, she'd hear another voice softly echoing her words from the direction of the closet. At first, she thought it was the acoustics, sound bouncing oddly through the space. But one night, as she repeated her lines, the echo spoke a heartbeat later, with a slightly different inflection, as though the voice was correcting her. She froze, breath caught. The dorm's silence pressed in heavy. Then, faintly, she heard a whisper. Just a word. Again. Nadia turned slowly toward the curtain that hung over the small dorm window. The fabric shifted slightly, though the air was still. "Hello?" she called out. No answer. The whisper didn't return, but she could feel it. Something behind that curtain, listening. The next day, she mentioned it to her acting instructor, half laughing it off. The instructor looked uneasy. "You're in the old wing, right? They used to host small performances there years ago. That dorm used to be part of the original theater building before they rebuilt it." She smiled, trying to brush it off, but Nadia noticed her teacher's hands tremble slightly as she packed up her things. That night, Nadia left her phone recording while she rehearsed. She wanted to prove it was just her mind playing tricks. Hours later, she played it back. Between her lines, there was a whisper, soft, feminine, and impossibly close to the microphone. The same word again. Again. Nadia felt a rush of cold air move across her shoulders. She deleted the recording immediately, but the whispers grew bolder after that. They began speaking along with her lines, not repeating them, but finishing them, anticipating what she was going to say. Sometimes, they murmured words from scenes she hadn't rehearsed yet. Sleep became impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she swore she could hear a woman's voice humming through the room, like a lullaby just under the sound of her heartbeat. One night, desperate, she tore open the curtain, half expecting to see someone standing behind it. Nothing, just the window, streaked with condensation. But when she stepped closer, she realized there were faint handprints on the glass, small and smudged, pressed from the inside. The next rehearsal, she couldn't focus. She kept forgetting her lines, her hands shaking. Her instructor pulled her aside and asked if she was okay. Nadia nodded, but her reflection in the rehearsal mirror smiled a second too late. Later that evening, she decided to confront whatever was happening. She stood in the middle of her room, script in hand, and said clearly into the air, "If you're here, stop hiding." The lights flickered once. The air turned icy. The curtain rippled violently, though the window was closed. A voice, clearer than ever before, whispered, "Your stage." The curtain fell still. Nadia stepped forward cautiously, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. For a moment, she thought she saw someone else's face overlapping hers. A woman with dark eyes and a sorrowful expression. Then it was gone. She spent the next day researching the dorm's history in the campus archives. Buried in an old article from the 1980s, she found a name, Clara Moreau, a theater student who disappeared after a rehearsal one night. They never found her body, but her final performance was supposed to be in the very play Nadia was now rehearsing. The role she was playing had been Clara's last. The realization hit like a blow to the chest. The whispers weren't random. They were lines from Clara's unfinished script. That night, she decided to record herself one last time. She read through the entire scene, her voice trembling. When she reached Clara's final line, "And the curtain closes for me alone," the light flickered and the whisper came again. But this time, it wasn't a voice repeating hers. It was applause. Dozens of hands clapping, echoing faintly around the room. Nadia's breath caught. Her eyes darted around the space, empty. But the sound didn't stop. The curtain rustled as if someone were standing just behind it, bowing. She stumbled backward, whispering, "Stop, please stop." The applause grew louder, echoing impossibly from the walls, until a single, hoarse whisper cut through it. "Encore." The light bulb above her desk shattered. She screamed and ran out of the room, barefoot, down the hall, not stopping until she reached the stairwell. When she looked back, she saw the faint glow of her desk lamp flickering back to life, illuminating the curtain. For just a moment, she thought she saw a figure step out from behind it. A woman with dark hair, wearing an old-fashioned costume, taking a bow. Then the light went out again. Nadia moved out the next morning. She switched majors a week later. Theater was over for her. But sometimes, when she passed the performing arts dorm, she'd hear faint humming through the walls, like someone rehearsing behind the curtain of an invisible stage. On the last day of the semester, a new freshman moved into Nadia's old room. She found a single sheet of paper pinned to the wall, yellowed and torn, with a handwritten line in faded ink. It read, "The curtain never closes if someone is still watching." The narrator's voice returns, soft and deliberate, heavy with melancholy. She thought the stage was hers, but it already belonged to someone who never left. And every night, when the curtain moves with no wind to stir it, the audience should remember, it's not always the living who come to perform. The faint sound of applause echoes once, distant, fading slowly into silence. The architecture dorm was supposed to be one of the newer buildings on campus, sleek, modern, all glass and steel. But there was something cold about it, sterile in a way that didn't feel alive. The kind of building that was designed to impress, not to comfort. Theo had transferred in mid-semester, quiet, awkward, and deeply obsessed with his designs. He stayed up late most nights sketching in his dorm room. His desk littered with mechanical pencils, rulers, and half-drained coffee cups. He loved the silence until the silence started listening back. It began with small things. He'd wake up to find his blueprints rearranged on the floor, corners weighted perfectly flat as if someone had pressed them down overnight. His model buildings, tiny replicas of his class projects, were shifted slightly out of place, their fragile spires tilted toward the door. He blamed sleepwalking, exhaustion, anything rational. But one morning, when he reached for his sketchbook, he froze. A new drawing had appeared. Not his hand, not his style. It was darker, rougher. The lines were harsh, angry. It showed the dorm itself, but distorted, stretched like a shadow seen through broken glass. Theo's roommate, Dylan, laughed it off when he showed him. "You probably did it in your sleep," he said. But his tone faltered when he noticed the signature in the corner. 3 jagged initials. No one Theo knew had those initials. That night, Theo dreamed of walking through the dorm, but the corridors were longer, narrower, like a maze. The air was thick, heavy with dust. He turned a corner and found himself in a room that shouldn't exist. A perfect cube of concrete, with a single desk in the center and blueprints pinned to every wall. As he stepped closer, he saw that every blueprint was signed the same way. R.M. He woke up gasping, sweat cold on his skin. On his desk, his sketchbook was open again to another new drawing. This one was of his own room, drawn from an angle above, as if seen through the ceiling. The only color was a faint red line scrawled across the page, circling his bed. He couldn't shake it. He tried staying out of the dorm as long as possible, working late in the architecture studio instead. But when he came back one night around 3 a.m., he found something that made his heart stop. His door was open. Inside, his desk lamp was on, flickering faintly. Every one of his model buildings was gone, except for one sitting in the middle of the floor. It was a perfect miniature replica of his dorm room, built in exact detail. He knelt down, trembling, staring at it. Inside the tiny model, he could see two figures, tiny hand-carved silhouettes. One was sitting at a desk. The other was standing by the window. Theo turned toward the window in his real room. Nothing there, just the faint reflection of his pale, terrified face. But in the model, the standing figure had moved. It was now positioned right beside the figure at the desk. The lamp flickered violently. He stumbled back, knocking the model over. When it hit the floor, the sound that followed wasn't the light clatter of wood. It was a dull, heavy thud, like something falling from a great height. The next morning, Dylan found Theo staring blankly at his desk, surrounded by torn blueprints. His voice was hoarse. "It's building itself," he muttered. "Every night. It's changing." Over the next few days, things escalated. The floor plan of the dorm seemed subtly different each night. A hallway that felt shorter before now seemed to stretch farther. The exit signs flickered inconsistently, pointing in slightly different directions. Dylan tried to laugh it off until he couldn't anymore, when he got lost coming back from the bathroom one night and swore the hall had rearranged itself. Theo became obsessed with the mystery. He started tracing the building's layout, overlaying old campus maps he found online. That's when he discovered something chilling. The current dorm was built on the exact site of a condemned structure from the 1970s, an experimental design project created by a student named Raymond Morrow. R.M. The original building was considered cursed. Its plans were said to create impossible angles, corridors that led nowhere, rooms that changed dimensions. The project was abandoned after Morrow vanished one night before graduation. The university demolished the building a year later. Or so they thought. Theo couldn't stop himself. He stayed up for 3 nights straight, mapping, sketching, connecting every anomaly he'd noticed. His notes filled the walls, measurements, angles, equations. But his last page was different. It wasn't math. It was a phrase, scribbled over and over. He's still drawing. On the 4th night, Dylan woke to the sound of scratching. Not paper, something deeper, heavier. He turned on the light and froze. Theo was standing at the wall, dragging a pencil hard enough to dig into the paint, sketching something furiously. His hand moved too fast, his breathing ragged. Dylan shouted his name, but Theo didn't respond. When Dylan finally pulled him away, Theo's eyes were unfocused. On the wall was a drawing of a door that didn't exist in their room. Dylan blinked in disbelief, and then, from the other side of that drawn door, came 3 slow knocks. They ran. Neither of them returned that night. When they came back the next morning with a resident advisor, the drawing was gone. The wall looked untouched, but Theo's sketchbook was open on the bed, displaying a new page, a perfectly drawn floor plan of the dorm. And at the bottom, a note in unfamiliar handwriting, "Blueprints complete." Theo withdrew from school a week later. Dylan switched dorms immediately after. The university maintenance team repainted their old room, but they claimed that no matter how many coats they applied, faint pencil lines still bled through the paint, forming shapes of windows and walls that didn't exist. Late at night, students passing by the architecture dorm sometimes hear the faint scrape of pencil against plaster, slow and rhythmic. Some say if you knock on the wall near room 204, you'll hear another knock in return, from inside the blueprint. The narrator's tone lowers, calm but hollow. Some dorms remember their dead. Others remember their design. But the architecture dorm? It's still being built, one line, one wall, one missing student at a time. A soft mechanical sound hums beneath the closing line, like a drafting table creaking, or pencil on paper, and then fades into silence. The psychology dorm was one of the quietest buildings on campus. Tucked away behind the library, with ivy creeping up its sides and narrow windows that never seemed to let in enough light. Most students loved it for that very reason. Isolated, peaceful, the perfect place to study. But for Mara, it was too quiet. She was a sophomore majoring in cognitive psychology, fascinated by the human mind, dreams, and the way the brain filled silence with sound. When she moved into room 217, she didn't know how literal that fascination would become. Her first week went by normally. She unpacked her books, pinned photos above her bed, and set up her tiny diffuser that smelled faintly of lavender. But almost immediately, she began having vivid, heavy dreams. Dreams that didn't feel like her own. She would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, certain someone had whispered her name. Mara? A voice breathed, soft but close, as if spoken just behind her ear. Each time, she'd jolt upright, her lamp flicking on with trembling hands, only to find the room empty. She convinced herself it was her imagination, the result of too much late-night studying. But then she began dreaming of other people's memories, scenes she didn't recognize. She saw flashes of the dorm hallway decades ago, with different furniture, faded paint, students wearing older styles of clothes. In one dream, she stood outside her door and watched a girl walk past her, carrying a notebook. The girl's face was blank, blurred at the edges. When Mara tried to speak, the girl turned and mouthed something soundlessly before vanishing into static. The dreams became more frequent, more invasive. One night, she woke up not in her bed but sitting on the dorm floor, the carpet cold against her legs. Her notebook lay open beside her, a pen still in her hand. Across several pages, she'd written the same sentence over and over in shaky handwriting. "I hear what they left behind." Her roommate, Lena, laughed it off at first, teasing her about sleep writing. But when it happened again, when Mara began whispering in her sleep, reciting names Lena didn't recognize, the laughter stopped. Lena began recording the audio one night out of curiosity. The next morning, she played it back for Mara. Between the soft sounds of their breathing, another voice emerged. Low, wet, and deliberate. It wasn't Mara's voice, nor Lena's. The voice said, "You're in my room." That day, they both skipped class and went straight to the resident advisor, who suggested stress counseling. But when Mara mentioned the dreams, the ones that showed rooms that didn't exist anymore, the advisor's face went pale. "They remodeled this floor years ago," she said quietly. "Half of these rooms were sealed off after an incident in the late 80s. That night, neither girl slept. They sat together with the lights on, whispering about transferring dorms. Around 3 a.m., the hallway light outside their door flickered, casting long, warped shadows under the doorframe. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps, slow, unhurried, moving toward their room. The footsteps stopped just outside. Then, a whisper, soft and stretched through the wood. "You shouldn't be here," Lena screamed. They ran to the door and yanked it open, but the hallway was empty. The motion sensor lights buzzed to life, washing everything in pale white. There was no one there, but on the floor, just outside their door, lay a single sheet of yellowed notebook paper, a psychological study consent form. The name written in the participant line was Mara. The next day, Mara couldn't concentrate in class. Every sound felt amplified. The scratching of pencils, the ticking clock, even the shuffle of shoes behind her. Her professor was lecturing about dream theory when a slide appeared briefly on the projector before flickering out. It showed a photograph of a dorm room, hers. The same furniture, same placement, same soft lavender diffuser. No one else seemed to notice the glitch, but Mara's stomach dropped. She returned to her dorm early that evening to find Lena gone. No note, no message, just her half of the room stripped bare. On the desk sat Lena's phone, screen cracked, still recording audio. Mara pressed play. Static filled the air. Then a whisper. You can't wake up if it's not your dream. That night, Mara's dreams shifted. She wasn't herself anymore. She saw through another girl's eyes. A student sitting at her desk decades ago, writing in a notebook by lamplight. The girl looked anxious, glancing at the door repeatedly. From the corner of the dream, something whispered, "Write it down." The girl obeyed, scribbling words furiously. When Mara leaned closer to see what she was writing, her breath caught. The words were the same ones she had written herself. "I hear what they left behind." The girl turned to look at her, but the eyes that met hers were pitch black, wide and endless. The whisper came again, layered this time, hundreds of voices overlapping. "Wake up!" Mara gasped awake, clawing at her bedsheets. Her room was different. The walls were painted a different color, the furniture older. A dusty layer coated everything. The air felt thick, unmoving. The hallway outside looked unfamiliar. No LED lights, no modern carpeting. She ran to the window, but outside was nothing but fog. She stumbled back toward the desk and saw the same notebook from her dream sitting there, open to the last page. The ink was still wet. Her own handwriting, trembling, read, "I woke up in her dream." Then the door creaked open behind her. Slow, heavy. A shadow stretched long across the floor. She didn't turn. She couldn't. The whisper came again, right behind her ear. "Thank you for switching." When the R.A. checked the room the next morning, it was empty. No sign of Mara or Lena. The only thing left behind was a notebook, open to that same line, and an old photo of two girls standing in front of room 217. One of them clearly Mara, the other unknown, her face smudged and faded. The narrator's voice cuts through the quiet like a breath. Some studies never end. Some dreams don't belong to us. And some dorm rooms are just waiting for the next mind to sleep in. A faint whisper overlaps the ending, barely audible, almost lost under the background hum. Repeating her name one last time, "Mara," before the sound fades into silence. The co-ed dorm on the far end of campus was famous for its rooftop view. On clear nights, students gathered there to drink cheap wine, watch the city lights, and talk about everything and nothing. But by winter break, the roof was deserted. Too cold, too windy, too quiet. That's when Daniel moved in. He was a photography major, reserved, polite, and perpetually exhausted. His insomnia made him restless, and he often wandered campus at night with his old Nikon, chasing light in the dark. When he heard that his new dorm had rooftop access, it felt like a blessing. The first night he went up there, the campus below was almost silent. Only the hum of distant traffic and the whistle of wind filled the space. The sky was a deep indigo, clouds sliding like ghosts across the moon. He took photo after photo, the skyline, the old clock tower, the faint reflections in the dorm's top-floor windows. But when he checked his camera later, one photo stopped him cold. It showed a figure standing behind him in the reflection. Tall, motionless, features obscured by shadow. He laughed it off, told himself it was lens flare, a trick of the light. But when he zoomed in, he saw details, shoulders, a hand resting on the railing, hair moving slightly in the wind. The reflection was impossibly sharp. And yet, he'd been alone. The next night, he went back up. This time, he set his camera on a timer and stepped into the frame, trying to recreate the shot. He posed under the same light, the same angle. When the shutter clicked, he checked the image immediately. There it was again, the same figure but closer now. Its head tilted slightly toward him. Daniel felt the air shift, colder suddenly. He spun around, but the roof was empty. The sound of the wind had gone strangely muffled, like the night was holding its breath. Then, faintly, he heard a single click, the sound of a camera shutter from behind him. He turned slowly, flashlight trembling in his hand. The roof stretched empty in every direction. No one there. But on the ground near the access door, he noticed something glinting, a Polaroid photo. He picked it up. The picture showed the rooftop, but with him standing at the edge looking over. The problem was, he hadn't taken that photo. From that night on, the strange occurrences escalated. His camera began turning on by itself. He'd wake to the soft, mechanical sound of the shutter clicking in the dark. Once, when he checked his memory card, he found dozens of new photos, everyone taken while he slept. Some showed his dorm room from impossible angles. Above his bed, outside his window, and one directly in front of his face. His hands shook as he scrolled through them, heart pounding in his chest. The last photo was different. It wasn't his room. It was the rooftop, and in the center of the frame, his own body stood at the edge, staring down. He barely slept after that. His friends noticed his dark circles, his anxious glances toward shadows. He deleted the photos, reformatted his camera, even considered selling it. But something in him couldn't let it go. He needed to know what it was, who it was. He told himself it was just someone messing with him, some tech-savvy student pulling a cruel prank. So he went back to the rooftop one last time. This time he brought his camera, a flashlight, and his laptop. The wind howled, biting against his face. He set up his tripod and pressed record, the red light blinking like a heartbeat in the dark. "Whoever you are," he called out into the night, "I know you're up here." For a long time, nothing happened. Just the wind and the faint hum of the city below. Then, through his viewfinder, he saw it, the shadowed outline of a figure standing at the far edge of the roof. Not approaching, not moving away, just standing, facing him. "Who are you?" he shouted. The wind swallowed his words. The figure raised an arm slowly, deliberately, pointing toward him. Then the camera shutter fired again, once, twice, 3 times. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. When he lowered his camera, the figure was gone. But on his digital screen, 3 new photos had appeared. The first showed the figure standing at the edge. The second showed it walking closer. The third, he froze. The third showed himself holding the camera, staring into the lens. Behind him, the same figure's hand rested gently on his shoulder. He stumbled backward, heart hammering, eyes darting across the roof. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." But the roof was empty again, or so he thought. When he turned to leave, the access door was closed. Locked from the inside, his flashlight flickered out. He pulled at the handle until his palms ached. Then, from somewhere in the dark, the sound came again, soft and steady. Click, click, click. He spun in circles, shouting into the wind. Each time the shutter clicked, a flash of light illuminated him briefly, like lightning, but there was no source. Each flash caught him in a different position, closer to the edge. He screamed for it to stop. Then silence. The next morning, campus security found his camera on the roof, lens cracked, battery dead. The last photo, captured at 3:12 a.m., showed the rooftop railing and a single hand gripping it tightly. The rest of the frame was filled with blurred city lights far below. No one ever found Daniel. But every few weeks, students who live in that dorm say they hear it, the faint mechanical click of a camera coming from the rooftop, always between 3 and 4 a.m. Sometimes, when they check their phones the next morning, they find a new photo in their gallery, a picture of the view from their dorm window taken from above. The narrator's tone lowers to a whisper, carrying a chill that seems to echo. Some say he finally captured the perfect shot, the one where he disappeared. But the camera didn't stop shooting, because maybe something else is still trying to get the focus right. The wind swells in the background, blending with the faint sound of a camera shutter. One last click cuts through the silence before the sound fades out entirely. The dorm at the edge of campus had been built in the 1960s, a forgotten concrete block that most students avoided if they could. Its windows were small, its halls narrow, and its walls carried a faint scent of mildew and something older, something metallic like rust or blood. They said it used to be a medical dorm, housing students who worked in the old campus infirmary before it was demolished. Most of them didn't know, or didn't want to know, that the infirmary's morgue used to be in the basement beneath their feet. Tessa didn't believe in campus rumors. She was a pre-med student, rational and grounded. She'd worked hard to get her scholarship, and the last room available happened to be in that dorm. "A room's a room," she told herself as she dragged her suitcase up the echoing stairwell. Her roommate, a quiet nursing student named Riley, greeted her with a tired smile. The two of them hit it off easily. Long nights studying, late talks about anatomy and lab reports. But soon, the late nights brought something else with them. Started small. They'd hear the elevator moving at odd hours, though no one ever got off. Sometimes, when they passed the basement door on the way to the laundry room, they'd hear a low hum, almost like the whirring of machinery behind the walls. The R.A. told them the basement was sealed off decades ago after a pipe failure. No one was allowed down there. But the hum persisted, faint but constant, as if something was still working below. One night around 2 a.m., while studying for an exam, Tessa heard a sharp metallic clang beneath the floor, followed by a dragging sound. It lasted several seconds, then stopped. She looked at Riley, who froze mid-sentence. "You heard that too, right?" Riley whispered. They sat perfectly still, the room holding its breath. Then came another sound, this time clearer. The squeal of wheels turning slowly against concrete, like a gurney being pushed down a hall. Tessa stood and pressed her ear to the floor. The noise grew louder, rhythmic. Squeak, drag, squeak, drag. Her stomach twisted. "Maybe it's the pipes," Riley said weakly, but her voice cracked halfway through. The next day, they asked the maintenance worker about it. He avoided their eyes. "Old building," he muttered. "Sometimes it remembers what it used to be." That night, neither of them could sleep. Around midnight, their dorm lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The hallway outside glowed faintly from the emergency light strips, casting everything in dull red. Then the hum started again, low and steady, rising like an engine coming to life. Tessa grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. "I'm going to the R.A., she said, trying to sound steady. But when she opened the door, she froze. A faint, cold mist hung in the hallway. At the far end, by the stairwell, stood an old metal gurney. It was empty, but the wheels were slowly turning on their own. Riley gasped. "Tessa!" The basement door. Tessa turned. The door that had always been locked now stood slightly open, a strip of pure black gaping beyond it. The hum grew louder, accompanied by the faint echo of dripping water, or maybe blood. The air smelled sterile, sharp, like antiseptic. They should have run. But something about that hum pulled Tessa forward, like curiosity tugging at a nerve she couldn't ignore. She crept down the stairs, flashlight trembling in her grip. The air grew colder with every step. Riley followed, whispering, "This isn't smart. We shouldn't be here." At the bottom, the light fell across white tiles streaked with brown stains. Old hospital beds leaned against the walls, rusted metal frames covered in dust. In the corner, a single surgical light flickered weakly, illuminating a table with straps hanging from its sides. Beside it stood a set of old morgue drawers, 12 in total. Half were closed. The others hung open, empty. The hum filled the room like a heartbeat. It seemed to come from the far wall, where a large metal door stood, thick, industrial, sealed with a wheel lock. Stenciled on its surface, half faded, were the words, "Cold storage." "Let's go," Riley whispered, but Tessa stepped closer. She couldn't explain why. She just needed to see. Her fingers brushed the metal wheel. The hum cut off instantly. Silence dropped like a weight. Then, from inside the door, came 3 dull thuds. Thump, 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 slow and deliberate, as if something inside was knocking back. Riley screamed and bolted for the stairs, but Tessa couldn't move. Her flashlight flickered wildly. The thudding grew louder, faster, until it became pounding. Something desperate, something that wanted out. Then the wheel on the door began to turn by itself. She stumbled backward, breath coming in ragged gasps. The wheel spun violently, and the door creaked open just an inch. A hiss of freezing air spilled out, fogging her vision. Inside the crack, she saw something move. A hand, gray, bloated, fingers curled, pressed against the opening. Tessa turned and ran, the sound of metal groaning behind her. The lights above flickered, illuminating glimpses of things that shouldn't move. Shadows dragging themselves out of the drawers, eyes glinting from the corners. She burst through the stairwell door, sprinting until she collided with Riley halfway up. They didn't stop until they reached the first floor, collapsing in front of the R.A.'s door, sobbing. When campus security checked the basement, the door to cold storage was closed again. The hum was gone, but on the wall above the door, written in the condensation that hadn't existed before, were the words, "Thank you for remembering us." The school quietly closed off the basement for good after that. But the noise didn't stop. Residents still hear the hum on quiet nights, faintly beneath the floorboards. Sometimes it's accompanied by the creak of wheels, the squeal of metal on concrete. One girl swore she heard a voice through the vent whisper, "It's colder down here tonight." Tessa transferred dorms a month later. She couldn't stay, but even in her new room, far from that building, she said the hum followed her. She'd wake to the faint vibration under her bed, like something mechanical breathing beneath the floor. One night, she recorded it, just to prove she wasn't losing her mind. When she played it back, it wasn't machinery she heard. It was voices, overlapping, whispering softly, counting. The narrator's tone drops into a chilling calm, words dragging like a scalpel across glass. Some rooms hold memories, others hold bodies, and sometimes those two things are the same. The hum fades in again under the narration, subtle, deep, mechanical, rising until it almost becomes the sound of a heartbeat. Then silence. After everything that had happened that semester, the suicides, the disappearances, the whispers about things moving in the dark corners of campus, people thought the administration would finally close the dorms for good. But instead, they painted over the stains, fixed the lights, and acted like the building's history had never existed. Students moved back in as they always did. The new residents laughed about the old stories, dismissing them as campus legends meant to scare freshmen. They had no idea that some nightmares wait years to be remembered. Ethan was one of those new residents. A transfer student, photography major, quiet, always wearing his camera around his neck. He'd heard about the old dorm's haunting, but took it as an opportunity. He wanted to create an art project called Haunted Architecture, a photo series capturing abandoned or supposedly cursed spaces on campus. When he got permission to stay overnight in the closed-off East Wing, he thought it was his chance to create something that would get him noticed. That night, the building was empty except for him and his camera. The hallways were still lined with old doors sealed by chains, the air heavy with dust and the smell of rust. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, capturing fragments of old lives, forgotten backpacks, a shattered mirror, a student ID card from 1981 half buried under debris. Every step echoed too loudly. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, pressing against his skin. He began taking photos, long exposures to capture the faint ambient light leaking through the broken windows. But when he reviewed them on his camera screen, something strange appeared. In every third photo, a faint shape hovered in the background. A shadowy figure standing at the far end of the hall, motionless. He assumed it was a trick of the light. But when he turned to look, there was no one there. Ethan's breathing grew shallow. The air felt colder now, biting through his jacket. He took another picture, hand trembling slightly. The figure was closer this time, clearer. A person, head tilted, wearing what looked like an old campus jacket soaked in something dark. The mouth seemed open, wider than it should be. He tried to leave, but when he turned around, the hallway stretched longer than before, the exit door far in the distance, flickering under a dying light. He took a step, but the floorboards beneath him groaned as if the building were exhaling. Then, from one of the rooms, came the faint click of a door unlocking. Ethan froze. His camera strap swung gently against his chest. Then another door opened, and another, slowly, one by one, down the length of the hallway, each creaking open to reveal nothing but blackness beyond. He started to run, his flashlight jerking wildly. The halls twisted, turned, repeating like a loop. He passed the same torn bulletin board 3 times. On the 4th, something was different. The photos he'd just taken were pinned there, his photos, fresh prints that hadn't existed minutes ago. And in the final one, taken from behind him, He could see himself running down the hall. But behind him was the figure, no longer a shadow, but something real, reaching out. The camera in his hand clicked by itself, snapping another picture. The flash exploded, blinding him for a split second. When his vision cleared, the figure stood inches away. Pale skin stretched tight, hollow eyes, mouth still open as if screaming in silence. He dropped the camera and stumbled backward. Somewhere deep in the dorm, the faint hum began again, the same mechanical vibration Tessa had once heard. It pulsed through the walls, rattling the floor, syncing with Ethan's heartbeat. He bolted toward the stairwell, half tripping, half sliding, until he burst into the lobby. But the exit doors were chained shut, rusted links twisted tight. He turned, panting, and saw his camera lying at the foot of the stairs. The lens was cracked. Through it, a faint red light blinked, as if recording. On instinct, he lifted it and checked the last photo taken. It wasn't the hallway. It was his dorm room, his bed. And in that bed, someone was already lying there, eyes open, waiting. The hum grew louder until the whole building seemed to tremble. Light bulbs shattered, one after another. The doors upstairs slammed shut all at once. The last thing Ethan saw before the power went out was a reflection of himself in the lobby glass. Only his reflection was still smiling when he wasn't. The next morning, campus security found his equipment stacked neatly by the front door. His camera still worked, but every photo on it was black. Except one. The final image showed an empty dorm hallway lit by the weak morning sun. Down the center of it, faintly visible, was a figure walking away. Blurry, but wearing Ethan's jacket. After that night, they finally closed the East Wing for good. Students say you can still see flashes of light in the windows sometimes, like camera flashes in the dark. Others claim if you take a photo in that building, you'll always find one more picture on your camera than you took. The narration fades, voice quiet, hauntingly calm. Sometimes, what haunts a place isn't what was left behind, but who stayed to keep remembering it. As the outro music swells, the sound of the mechanical hum returns one last time. Low, distant, vibrating faintly under the static, before cutting out completely, leaving only silence and the echo of a camera shutter clicking once in the dark. The dorm now stands empty, its windows boarded, its halls silent. But even in that silence, there's a pulse, a presence that doesn't fade. Students walking past at night swear they hear faint footsteps pacing behind the walls, or the click of a camera shutter in the dark. Maintenance workers refuse to go inside after sunset. They say the air feels charged, like the moment before a flash of lightning. One even claimed to see a figure standing in a window on the 4th floor, a young man holding a camera, smiling faintly. The university denies everything, of course. They say the stories are just campus folklore, the kind that spreads when the nights grow long and the campus grows cold. But those who've lived there know better. The hum still returns every October, faint and rhythmic beneath the ground, echoing through pipes and wires like the heartbeat of something that refuses to die. Some memories cling to walls, some haunt photographs, and some just wait for new tenants. The narrator's voice fades to a whisper. If you ever hear the hum, don't go looking for it, because sometimes it's already looking for you. The camera pans over the now abandoned campus, the dorm standing silent against the night sky, windows black like empty eyes. The narrator's voice returns, soft, haunting, almost tender. 10 stories, 10 warnings. Some say they're just urban legends, but every legend starts with truth. A faint wind carries the echo of laughter, of footsteps, of a door creaking somewhere deep inside. The final shot lingers on a single window, where for just a second, a light flickers on, and a shadow moves behind the glass. Then it fades to darkness. The hum returns one last time. Fade out.